Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to another edition of Tech Interviews. So, on this week's show, we're taking a look at a topic that fascinates me, and I think probably fascinates most IT pros and CIOs that I talk to. Is what does the future of our work environment look like? What does communications and collaboration look like in the future? What's the new world of work going to look like as we as we do hopefully come out of the world of COVID that we've all been very much used to for the last year or so. To discuss that with me this week, I'm joined by a special guest, Michael Peachey. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, well, good to have you on the show. I'm real well. And yourself, you doing well?
Doing great. It's a sunny day here in the Bay Area, and we're looking forward to it.
It's a sunny but very windy day here in the Liverpool area. So but the Bay Area, the Bay Area's not a bad place to be stuck, I guess.
No,
Of places you could be, it's not the worst. So that's good.
yeah, if you're
Well,
gonna
look.
get sent home, if you're gonna get sent home for a year for coronavirus, it's not a bad place to
Yeah.
do it.
Well, look, Michael, before we kind of jump into the topic, as we always do here on Tech Interviews, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself, tell people about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Michael Peachey. I run our global user experience and design organization here at Ring Central. For your listeners who don't know Ring Central, we provide collaboration solutions that help people at organizations stay connected and stay productive. So we've got products for giant enterprises. We've got free messaging and video products that anybody can go and download.
Yeah, so we were talking actually before we started recording that I have your app on my desktop because again, probably like most of us, we've used so many platforms
Hmm.
that we've probably lost count. And actually, before we jump into the topic, for you guys, what's the last 12 months been like? Because certainly my view is for most collaboration tool companies that it's probably been a pretty hectic 12, 15 months or so for you.
Yeah. So, back in March of 2020, when, at least here in the Bay Area, that's when coronavirus became a thing and a lot of organizations sent their employees home. We started this global, unwanted, unexpected experiment in distance work and distance collaboration. So it was super interesting at Ring Central because we were both affected by coronavirus in terms of the changes in the workplace. Like we were remote, like everybody else, but it injected a lot of meaning into the work that we were doing because you know we always liked building collaboration products for people, but suddenly it became a lot more meaningful. The every decision we made as a design team was affecting millions of people, and their health, their sanity, their ability to get things done. So it's been a great, pretty much almost exactly 12 months now, as we're talking now in March 2021.
Yeah, and actually, I think you make a couple of really interesting points there. And actually, one of them that I suppose we don't always think about. I think that phrase "massive experiment." That's not a phrase I've heard before, but I think it's absolutely right, isn't it? I think with all kinds of enterprises, it doesn't really matter what kind of enterprise you look like. We've all been kind of trying to almost fumble our way through how we've got
Hmm.
to where we are now. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you today. When your team kind of contacted me was because I'm fascinated to find out what's coming down the track for us as well. What's this going to look like? Because certainly the conversation I'm having with organizations all the time is what are we doing next? How are we evolving? What's the good things that we're going to take forward from all of this? And what are some of the things that we'll need to change? But I thought the other thing that you mentioned that's interesting, I think it's easy for outsiders like me looking into an organization like Ring Central. We look at yourselves and some of your well-known competitors, and what we see with them is that we just assume that they've spent the last 12 months going, this is fantastic, rubbing our hands together. Isn't business great? But like you said, you're as impacted as the rest of us. You went from, I guess, having head offices in the Bay Area or Silicon Valley or wherever. You've kind of gone from that to everybody working from home, this massive distributed workforce, and all the changes that's brought about. So I'm guessing that's been an interesting challenge. I mean, what have been some of the things that have surprised you in the last 12 months about that kind of this distributed workforce environment we all find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were really lucky, and I'll talk about our design team at Ring Central. So it's a global organization, and I've got a significant team of designers in Xiamen, China. So very early in before this was recognized as a pandemic in January of 2020, those regions of China were affected. So we kind of saw the wave coming because I had a bunch of people that had to go home. So we spent a couple weeks getting people better Wi-Fi connectivity from their homes, getting them the hardware they needed to collaborate, making sure they had the tools. We were quite lucky because as a maker of collaboration tools, I didn't need to go out and research how am I going to do video conferencing, how am I going to go do team messaging, how are people going to be able to make phone calls without using their own minutes, which can be a problem in parts of the world. Then when we saw that happening, we took our Belmont team, which is the largest part of my team. And before we were all sent home, we did a 48-hour drill. So we picked a Thursday and Friday. Happenstance turned out to be the week before we were actually sent home here in the Bay Area. Everybody went home and worked. So we were able to identify the problems, who had bad connectivity, who had a barking dog, who didn't have a good place to sit, so that when we did get sent home, we were kind of a leg up. So that was a great piece of the experiment that really helped us. The other thing that Ring Central did that I'm particularly pleased to be a part of, we immediately created a free product for our video collaboration and our messaging. We recognized that a lot of small businesses, healthcare providers, frontline workers, K through 12 schools, nonprofits, you know, were being hugely disrupted. And maybe a lot of them didn't have a lot of IT infrastructure to go think things through or to make decisions about where we're going to spend limited funds. So we put together a free product for those and then started marketing it out on the website and, through anybody that would listen, just say, look, we'll sort this out later together. But for now, go get the tools you need so that you can connect your employees and then you can stay doing the thing that you're doing, providing the service that you're doing. And then, over the last 12 months, you referenced the great experiment. This is I don't want to minimize the impact of COVID around the world. It's been a horrific thing, but there's been great opportunity in there to really understand how do people collaborate at a distance. I could never have a kind of experiment where, okay, let's go find 1,000 people and have them work from home for a month. Like, no organization would let me do that experiment, but we had that, and that really gave us a chance to get much, much better at how we help people be successful, how we help them thrive in a remote world. So
So
it's
you,
it's been a great it's been great. It's been interesting, challenging.
well, you mentioned a whole bunch of really good points in there, actually, and I appreciate we kind of people who've listened to the show or watched the show, in general, will know that I don't script this. We kind of get people on who've got interesting technology to talk about, but we have an outline of the kind of areas that we wanted to talk about. And what I like about the first 10 minutes of our chat so far is we've not covered any of the things that we thought we might, which is great though,
Always.
because I think it's a fascinating insight into we can look at an organization like Ring Central and assume that everything must have just been real easy for you. And I think what he was describing there, it was maybe it was useful that you had those development teams in China that gave you a little bit of a head start. But I suppose one of the things while he was talking that stuck in my mind was, have you seen over this kind of last 12 months or so that that some of the changes that you've seen and innovations that perhaps you've had to make, are some of those things, are they things that were you were going to make anyway and just had to accelerate, or has there been things that have again, we've touched on this experiment idea, but has this massive experiment, has been anything that's hugely surprised you in the 12 months, thinking, do you know what, we never would have figured that out, we never would have seen that coming if we hadn't had to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the biggest core surprise for us and everybody else when everybody got sent home to work remotely is that it worked. Yeah, I think prior to this, many organizations, many managers, many teams, many people, you know, always sort of pictured working from home as being people walking around in their bunny slippers and their pajamas and not getting much stuff done all day long. There's this idea of work-life balance, and if you're at home, then the life part is going to win and the work part's not going to win. So I think a lot of people in the beginning were concerned about productivity. What we saw in our own organization, what we saw as we talked to our customers, what we saw as we did research was actually the opposite. People became more productive. We saw that. You mentioned the China office that we had there. We immediately saw productivity increase because people weren't commuting. They didn't have anything else to do because you couldn't go to a movie, you couldn't go to the park with your kids, you couldn't go out to dinner, and that gap got filled with work rather than with not work. So surprisingly, the issue became stress management more than it became productivity. That then was followed up by fatigue, and we're all familiar with, or certainly the people listening to your podcast are likely very familiar with how tiring it is to sit in front of a computer and look at people in little rectangular boxes all day long. So that productivity spike started to decline, not because people were working less, but because they were not working as efficiently. And that largely became the focus of a lot of the stuff that we did in our product design. Rather than how do I connect you to more people on the screen at the same time so you can listen to them or talk to them, it became more a question of how do we connect you socially and emotionally in some real way to the people that you need to be connected with. I read a great piece the other day where the blogger was writing. Her point was, you know, I think a lot of us didn't recognize how much we liked the people we worked with until they were taken away from us.
Well, I think again, you make a whole bunch of great points here, and and actually, I think that kind of, it's absolutely right. Here we are, we're recording this conversation, looking at each other in small boxes on a screen, and I think because I think one of the things that I've seen is often a challenge during the day is that idea of this kind of back to back thing that we do, where
Mhm.
we're in the real world. You wouldn't go necessarily from all day one meeting to one meeting to one meeting. You'd build in some gaps. You may be traveling between locations. Whereas here, of course, we're all sat in one place, and we've got a call 1 till 2, and then there's one straight after 2 till 3, and then we're 3 to 3:30, and then we've got 3:30 to 6, and suddenly that happens real quick. And I think that's an interesting challenge. And I think the other thing that you said as well, and I mentioned this earlier on actually when you talked about kind of you guys presented a free product as almost one of the first things that you did, that I think you're right in that we are surprised at how quickly many of us adapted to this kind of thing. And I think there's lots of things that have allowed us to do that. Cloud-based services, solutions as a service has been a huge part of that, of course, making them easy to
Mhm.
consume. But I think, there should be a pat on the back for organizations like Wing Central who were, I think on the whole, and I think it's easy to forget this now as we look back nearly 12 months, but I think on the whole, we're really quick to, they had solutions to a problem and were quick to offer them out. They were quick to say, come and try, and I get, there's a strategy to that longer term that says, maybe we win some customers with doing that. But I do get the feeling that genuinely that's not the driver. The driver was, we see a problem in the world. We have a technology that we hope can fix it. So let's make it available. So if people want to take it and use
And
it, great.
absolutely, if you can do something, I believe, and our team believed as well, that you should. We'll worry about how we deal with it later, but step number one was be of service.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, I think it's easy for us to forget all that as we look back and and talk about what you guys did, and obviously, I said before, some of your well-known competitors also all made lots of these kind of solutions available to them, and I think it's fascinating, kind of the things that you've discovered over the last 12 months, and and some of those things that you've probably now started to build into your solutions that you probably would never have considered because we've just not seen this way of working, but. I think it's been fascinating kind of digging into some of those things that you've learned, but I do want to kind of get into this topic of what comes next. So, maybe to set a little bit of context for people, what's your view of the current state of the way that organizations are using collaboration and communications technology? What does the current workplace look like in your view?
Interesting question. What we've seen is with the organizations that we've talked to and the organizations that we've researched, we've seen them kind of split into two cohorts. The people we spend most of our time talking to, not surprisingly, given that we market collaboration products, are very collaborative. Right? There's another set of organizations out there that we've seen in our research that have not thrived quite as well. The first clear split are those organizations that gave their teams the tools they needed to be successful: stable, secure, well working collaboration tools. In this environment, the phone on your desk or your mobile and an email are not really enough to be successful. So those organizations that are using tools like Ring Central's team messaging, our video collaboration, our telephony products, calendars, task managers, things like that, you can get stuff done, or anybody else's tools that are out there that do this sort of thing. There are other organizations that have struggled to get that kind of collaboration tech in place, culturally or for whatever reason. Um, and we see those organizations not thrive versus their peers. The other very interesting thing that we saw in our research was this idea of um, an individual in the organization, this like champion of culture that could be anybody. It could be a leader, it could be the CEO or a team lead someplace, or just one particular individual on a team who is the one that kind of rallied people and got them together. This champion of collaboration. They were the ones that started scheduling the virtual happy hours. They were the ones who thought, you know what, let's all just get up from our desks tomorrow at 2 and get on the phone with each other with our AirPods and walk around the block in the sunshine. Right? Those organizations, the employees that we talked to, we did a survey of 4,000 people globally, knowledge workers. Um, those that had that kind of champion built these connected cultures. And those employees reported dramatically improved productivity, optimism, effectiveness. And that helped their teams and their organizations.
And yeah, I probably know the answer to this before I ask it, but let's ask it anyway. So because that's really interesting. I think that's a really interesting example that you shared there. And it's one of the things that I've seen in organisations that I've spoken to. That kind of cultural embracing of the challenge. That they've seen. That they've recognised that asking people to sit looking at small boxes on screens all day is not uber productive for them, and actually they've learnt that we need to think differently. I mean, I'll share an example with you. I was talking to a CIO at a very well-known financial institution, let's say, and he'd said actually as they were going into the winter, one of the things their senior management had said to their staff was, rather than starting your day in the dark and working through to another part of the day where it's dark, take a 2 hour lunchtime. Nobody's going to ask any
Mhm.
questions, but when you do that, get outside the house, go like you were talking about before, just go for a walk, go and do something interesting. So, I suppose the question I was going to ask was, how important do you think that the success has been? Because I think as a technologist, I'll look at the success and go, well, those who'd adopted cloud-like work approaches found this much easier. But how important do you think that cultural thing has been? Those who have grasped a culture both of wanting to find solutions but also recognizing problems. How important has that been for the success of companies who've done well in embracing kind of this distributed
Yeah,
working model we now have?
absolutely. Well, I think the two things go hand in hand. You need the tech in order to support things like that walk. So, it's and those soft things became much, much more important, or maybe we all realized how much more important they were in this great experiment because of the stress and the lack of interpersonal connection. I think it became a bigger deal. But take the example of that 2 hour walk in the afternoon. If you're in an organization where you struggle to stay connected to the information stream, let's just say that all you're doing are phone calls and video meetings and you're not doing a good job with team messaging products. If you take 2 hours away from an 8 hour block of calls, you're not going to be successful in your job. You can't thrive in your own role because you're going to be missing information. You're not going to be part of it. So great, go take a walk. But if you feel like you can't, you're not going to be able to do it. Now take an organization that's got a good integration in their workflow between meetings and messaging. So during my 1 hour walk, you and Betty and Bob are all having another meeting, but I'm not part of it. I'm taking my walk. If I can count on a good video recording after that meeting and one of you to post some next steps and things in our team chat, well, then I can relax on my walk and I actually can go do it. So you need both. It's not just go take a walk, it's go take a walk and come back and be productive for the rest of the day. Does that make sense? Am I
Eh,
getting at that
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
yeah, it makes perfect sense. And
broad?
actually, I was just kind of thinking as you was describing it, I think that importance of I mean, in my day job, I talk to lots of people about kind of data management. I look after data management consultancy type business. That's kind of what I do, and that conversation is often about portability of data. The ability to have data where we need it when we need it. And I
Hmm.
thought something you said there that was really interesting. And again, I'd not really thought about it, but was this idea about having collaboration and communications as part of your workflow. Not it can't be, for this to work successfully, it can't be just an adjunct. That we have meetings over Ring Central or any other platform that you want to mention. We have those meetings, but we're using those meetings as though they were a telephone call almost, and they're not kind of part of the way that we operate as a business. Is that something that's important, that people need to look at how you integrate these things together, so that collaboration tool becomes part of the process as opposed to just this kind of thing that sits alongside it?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, you brought up data, and in data, there's the idea you've got data at rest and data in motion, and you can't just be, um, if you're just pouring data into your data lake and you're not taking anything out and you're not doing any analysis, you're doing a lot of work, but nothing interesting is happening in there. That seamless transition from real time collaboration, what we're doing right now, you and I, to the more store and forward, the async kind of collaboration is really critical. And when you mentioned workflow, and workflow is exactly the right thing. Prior to the conversation that we're having, there were a number of asynchronous communications that happened in written form. And those could be on text messages, they could be on Slack, they could be on Ring Central's platform, they could be an email that, probably could even be a handwritten letter. But there's a back and forth that happens in order to get to the point where we're having this high bandwidth, high value, real time collaboration. When we're done with this, there's going to be more async back and forth. To the extent that those processes are integrated in your tools and in your workflow, then you've got this great seamless collaboration. So going back to the person taking the walk, what works for that is if the other people in her org that are having a meeting can extract the value of that meeting and leave it someplace for her to pick up when she's done, then she's been part of that whole process. And in the work from home, that becomes even more critical. So you think about the case of a caregiver, somebody who's got an elderly parent, they've got elementary school kids that they're trying, everybody in the world with elementary school kids suddenly became an IT manager about a year ago, right? You got to get your kids into the classroom meeting that's going on. You've got to go take care of a parent. You've got a dog that's barking. You're in and out. So being able to move from those store and forward async workflows into the real time and back is really critical. And we've been working on product features that do just that.
Yeah, well, I think that async communication piece, I mean, the pigeon that I sent over with the invite for this to you is still really
Mhm.
tired. It's a long way from the west coast of England to the west coast of the US. So let's kind of move on with, because you just kind of touched, you ended that piece actually mentioning some of the things that you're starting to build into your product suite. Some of the things that Ring Central are doing. So let's have a look at that. What are some of the innovations then that you expect us to, some of the changes that you've seen, some of the innovations that you're starting to build into your platforms. What are the kind of things that we, people listening to this who are enterprise IT managers and thinking, what do I want to be thinking about next when it comes to workflow
Mhm.
and collaboration and communications? What's some of the things that you guys are seeing, you're starting to build into your solutions? What are the things that these guys should be looking out for?
I think that the main thing is the integration of the three main tools that people use to collaborate in a work environment, which are voice. You need some sort of telephone system to call each other, and importantly, to make phone calls outside the organization, a sales call, go talk to a partner, a vendor, somebody who's not on your platform. You can't use Ring Central Video or Zoom or Microsoft Teams to make a restaurant reservation because they're not on your platform, right? So you need telephony. You need the meeting and the screen share and the video product for those real time high bandwidth knowledge sharing conversations at a distance, and you need some sort of messaging product, team messaging, direct messages, text, however that's going to go. Those are great in silos, and you need all three of them. But when you bring the three together, they become a lot more powerful. So, for example, in the Ring Central product, if you and I are having a direct conversation where we're texting each other in that store and forward async process, and I start writing a response, you ask me a question, I'm typing, and I'm like, you know what? This is going to be a lot easier to tell him. I can look up at your little avatar, a little circle with your face in it, see there's a green dot, which means you're not in the middle of anything. I can click a button, and you and I are now having a video chat or we're having a phone call. There's no sending you a link and a message about, hey, why don't we talk at 3 o'clock? Like, I'm not good at 3. How about 3:30? Okay, here's the URL. We're both going to go click on it, right? I just click a button and I'm talking to you. If you don't want to talk to me, you don't answer, right? Then I can finish typing my thing. So we can move seamlessly back and forth amongst those. I think two of the you asked before what was surprising, like what did we learn in this experiment? Two of my favorite features coming into the app were both driven by our own experiences in post COVID collaboration. Uh, One is a thing we call huddle room. So when all of this first started, one of the things that happened with me and my team is we felt disconnected. We were socially distant from each other, not by 6 feet, but by the other side of town. Um, so we started an experiment amongst ourselves. Luckily, we've got lots of tech. So we built a meeting that runs all day. And it was there at the end of a URL. And when we got up in the morning, the group of us that were doing this would just check in on that meeting and go put it on our other monitor. And what we wanted to understand was, did that help us feel connected to each other, or did it feel like Big Brother was watching? Okay. What we learned was that we like being connected to each other. The audio off, you're at your desk, you're not at your desk, you're eating a sandwich, there's no one there except the cat, right? We felt connected. That's now turning into a feature in the product where if we're in a message, you and me and Leela on the call here, if we're in a message thread because we're all working on the annual TPS report, we're messaging each other back and forth. There's a meeting associated with that conversation, a meeting room that's there all the time. Either any of us can go jump into it. But more interestingly, if I see that a couple of my team members are in that, I might just drop in like I do in the real world. See a couple of my buddies sitting in the office, like, hey, what are you guys up to? It recreates that both that social connection as well as that productivity gain because information now flows in those informal ways it used to in the organization. So that's one of my favorites.
So there's two things I wanted to ask off the back of that, and I appreciate we're already running short on our recording time. So because partly because I think we went off down that I was fascinated by. So I'm already thinking I'd love to have you come back on, and we may do some more
Oh,
around this because
absolutely.
it's a great topic. So it's always good to book a future podcast guest on one episode. But two things of what you've just said that in terms of you're talking about that experience of being able to communicate externally, and that idea that myself and you, we could be communicating. You'd see my face in that little circle, and then you could click on it and say, "Well, let me go and let's do a video call because that'll be easier than us messaging each other." And then you also mentioned this thing about kind of you just talked about there the idea that you have these meeting rooms, and did that make you feel connected like it would in the real world? So I suppose my two questions are one, feel free to answer if you can, and tell me to mind my own business if you can't. And the other one's just kind of a general, what do you think about it from an industry point of view? So from a communication, as part of the communication and collaboration industry, is there any kind of thing going on that would make that cross-platform communication as smooth as that? So if I'm on Ring Central and I've got somebody I want to talk to who's on Teams, is there any thought? Is there work in integrating platforms like that together so I could still click on the face and have that conversation? And then the other thing was that what you just said there about the real experience. Do you think the future of this is to try and replicate what the real world feels like, or is it an innovation of that? It's not quite replicating exactly the modern world, but it's trying to balance the best of both worlds, I suppose. So a lot to unpack in a short time there for you.
Well, I think that one of the things that you're touching on, and maybe this should be the subject of our next discussion, is what happens when half the world goes back to work and the other half is still remote. Because we're not going back to December 2019. We're going forward to December 2021. And I believe in that world that there are going to be people who never go back into the office that still retain their job. There are going to be people who are in the office sometimes, but not others. And there are going to be people who want to go back in more or less full time. So, how does an organization um, organize its workers so that those that are remote and those that are in the office are just as productive as each other and they don't separate into two halves? And that's a much, much longer conversation. And I'd be thrilled to have it because I think it's really important. This is where the world is going to. Um, your other question about the interconnectivity and that ease of collaboration, and do we copy what exists in the physical world, or do we do something better and different? And that's an easy one to answer. Progress happens when people try to copy something and miss. So what my team is going to do, and what smart people at all sorts of other organizations to do collaboration are going to do, they're going to take inspiration from the real physical world. They're going to try to copy it, and they're going to miss. And at some point, AI and virtual reality is going to come in, and we're going to have 3D avatars walking around, and maybe that's going to be great. But maybe that's not the thing that we're going to need in there. But the real world analogs are the places we want to start. So I'll give you another example of something we're doing in the product. In the real world, in the office, you and I are working in our cubes or wherever we are. I've got a vague sense of what you're up to. I got a vague sense of whether you're busy or not. And there's this debris that happens when people are doing work. Messy whiteboards, crumpled up pieces of paper, old pizza boxes, and things like that that we don't have in the virtual world. Right? Like, I don't know if you did an all-nighter last night to help deliver the big Johnson project or not. There's no debris. So how do we create that sort of trail of artifacts of work in those team collaborations? And that's again where the messaging and the meeting can come along. So as a data person, you understand logging, right? Every time something happens, it gets logged, right? What if in the collaborations, even if those small events which don't drive actual knowledge sharing are logged in some non-intrusive way, so that when I come in the morning, I just kind of see the debris of the collaboration that happened in Liverpool last night while I was sleeping. I might dip into that information stream and kind of be like, what are those notes about? Or what did those two guys talk about? Or I might just notice the empty pizza boxes. That gets us all connected to each other in that kind of physical way. But it's not exactly the way it happened in the office, right? Copy and miss a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating actually, and that how you almost embrace the that kind of nuance that you'd see in the real world. How do you embrace that into a world? Because I agree with you. I think while some people will go back to the office, not everybody will, and even those that go back may not go back all the time. And these are big shifts that organisations are going to have to deal with. Which was part of the reason I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I was interested in the take from somebody who worked in that industry and developed solutions for that industry. But we've already kind of run out of time, so I wanted to kind of wrap up quickly on just a couple of things. Obviously, we've mentioned Ring Central, so how do people find out a little bit more about what you guys do, particularly if they've maybe not come across you? I think most people probably have, but if they've not come across you, how do they find out a little bit about what you do? And what's a good way to follow up with you, Michael, if they're interested in kind of some of the topics you've talked about or what Ring Central are doing? How do they find out more?
Sure. So the best way to find out more about Ring Central is go to your favorite browser search application and type in Ring Central, one word or two words, whatever you like. You'll end up at ringcentral.com, and from there you can click around and learn about the products. We do have a free, unlimited version of our messaging and video product. That there's no 45-minute cap. There's no, I think you can put up to 100 people in a meeting, and it's all there. So if you don't have a preferred video and messaging product, go ahead and grab yourself some of that. If you already have one, but you're not really integrating the messaging and the video, I'd really encourage the forward-looking people, the ones who are thinking about the future in an organization. Go play around with how messages and team messages and video work well together, and see if that's something that works for your organization. As far as tracking me down, I imagine you'll have the name somewhere in the text accompanying the podcast. People can find me on LinkedIn. I'm also Googleable, so you can track me down that way. And if you want to talk more about the future of work, the hybrid workplace, we could. I'd be happy to talk more about that. It's great work you're doing to get the message out, and my goal is to help people and team leaders and organizations be successful in their collaboration. If you can help me get the message out, then you're I'm grateful.
Well, well, Michael, genuinely, it's been a real good conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I think it's such a wide topic, and it's, I think what you guys at Ring Central and and companies like yours are doing has been a huge part in allowing swathes of the economy to continue to operate around the globe, continue to operate in a way that we, 5, 10 years ago would, definitely 10 years ago, but maybe even 5 years ago would just not have been possible. So, but and I think the view of what you're seeing and how this will evolve, I think is interesting to kind of anybody who's charged with looking at how technology is going to underpin future business activities. So, Michael, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the show, and I'm definitely going to take you up on it. Look forward to having you back on in the not too distant future to talk some more. But for now, Michael, thanks for being on Tech Interviews, and thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that. For show notes, pop over to techstringy.com. We'll also find all of our previous Tech Interviews episodes. And if you've got an idea for a show or would like to appear as a guest, then why not email me at podcast@techstringy.com. To make sure you catch next Tech Interviews episode, then why not subscribe? You can subscribe right here on YouTube or in all good homes of podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Spotify. So until next time, thanks for watching.